Hey Dave, this is Harvey Kulka, and I'm running the tests on the paper that you sent me. We're going to be using a smaller swing away press. This is actually a low-cost Chinese-made press, but it works fairly decently. So we do a lot of prototyping and setup with that. It's easy to move around, so these are all good things. The other thing that we are doing to set this up is I'm using the red insulated heat pad, obviously no Teflon on it. Now, when I did set this up earlier, I did use a Teflon, the thin press material with a Teflon cover on it, just to kind of get an idea of what my temperature variations would be between the two. What's interesting here, if I can find my notes, is again, basically setting this up. You take the heat press, and I set it to 390 degrees because the first test we'll do is with the multi-trans, Forever multi-trans. I used my infrared thermometer, and with the infrared thermometer, when I actually take a reading 4 to 6 inches away from the center of my press, I'm getting a reading of approximately 405 degrees. So there's a 15-degree differentiation between what the press is reading and what the settings are reading. So this is kind of important to keep in mind. Actually, when I did the test earlier, I was getting a 410 versus 390, so a 20-degree swing. But we definitely have a different setting or different temperature than what we're seeing with the infrared. The other thing that I did was I took the rapid response, so this is the rapid response thermometer, and I attached the probe to a sheet of paper and then put the paper in, because I did notice in some earlier tests that this temperature will swing totally dependent upon what type of material you're using. So in other words, if I'm using 1/4-inch wood, the temperature will be much lower than if I'm using 1/8-inch wood. So what I wanted to do was use something as neutral as possible, so I used paper on that thermometer, put that on, and again, when I did the press and check, I pressed this for 1 minute, 60 seconds, and what I saw was with this material, the quick response was reading about 374 degrees Fahrenheit, so roughly, a difference of 15 degrees or so off of what the setting is on the machine. And when I use the Teflon coating, which is what we normally use for sublimation, I saw 363 degrees. Again, there was a difference in temperature, but that's because we feel the material and the reflective properties of it. So with the first set of tests we're going to do, which is with the multi-trans paper, we're going to open up this press when the temperature reaches 140 degrees C. Now, because the plate is a little bit hotter, I've made a correction on this to 135 degrees C. And so the first test, like I said, is going to be 1/4-inch wood. And I cut a whole series of 1/4-inch wood blanks that we'll be using for these tests. I also cut some 1/8-inch thick blanks, I'm sorry. But I think the more common use is going to be 1/4-inch. So I figured we'd stick with 1/4-inch at first. So again, we're going to use the Forever paper. The Forever paper, I got a little piece here, printed with the instructions out of my iColor 600. No issues, everything printed out pretty well. And this was set up for transparency. When we talk about the paper consistency itself, what I am noticing is that when I look at the brand X, as I call it, lovingly call the paper brand X, the Forever paper is much heavier than brand X. And when I feel the surfaces of the paper, the brand X feels to have less adhesive or maybe a thinner coating than what the Forever has. So that's my initial kind of indication that there is a little bit difference between the two. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to tape up and set up a Forever. This is a Forever multi-trans. So we're going to now take this over to the heat press. Now, the instructions call for a pre-press of 20 seconds, and I believe that's because we want to get the humidity out of the wood. This wood was cut on a laser. This was all stabilized within our shop. So it's definitely dry, it doesn't have any moisture in it. So I kind of skipped that step, but I don't see that really being an issue. What I am going to do though, is I'm going to put down a sheet of paper. Well, yeah, put a sheet of paper down, or sheet of parchment paper down. Then I'm going to put my design down, okay? And then, right next to my design, or close to it, I'm putting the rapid response thermometer, turning it on. I'm going to go ahead and put another piece of parchment over the top, and Forever calls for a 10 millimeter thick pad. That's awfully thick. This is 5 millimeter, I'm sorry, they call for a 5 millimeter pad, which is awfully thick. This is 2.5 millimeters. It does the job. I'm not sure why they want to go to a 10 millimeter, which, like I said, is an awfully thick piece of material. Then I go ahead and I set my material on. And then I'm going to adjust my pressure, because what they're asking for is firm pressure, 3 to 4 bars. That's about 3 to 4 bars. So I'm going to press it, and now I'm going to monitor the quick response thermometer. And what I'm looking for is the 135C. When it reaches 135C, I'm going to go ahead and open it up and then quickly peel, because it suggests peeling hot, the material. And we got 135. So I'm going to go ahead and pop this open. I'm going to take my mat off. I'm going to take my cover off. And I'm going to peel this hot as suggested. Peel's a little bit tough, but you can get it. I got a little bit of sticking on the paper up top. But overall, came out very nice, not bad. You can still see a little bit of the glue mark around the edge of it. So that to me would suggest one of two things. One, the press was a little bit hard, or the temperature or the duration of the press was a little bit long. So on the next ones, I think what I would do is remove some of that pressure to get this to go ahead and go without the glue mark. But again, you really can't make that out. It's so faint that you can't really even see it. Okay, Dave, so what we're going to do now is we're going to run the test on the Jodo paper. Now, the Jodo paper we got from Johnson's Plastics a while ago. And to be perfectly honest, we didn't have really good success with this paper at the beginning. Had a lot of press issues and had tried to work through this and couldn't. After a while, I think we finally determined that what was happening with this is we were getting improper drum heat or drum temperature on the i600. And weren't getting a really clean transfer to the paper. Since fixing that and getting better transfer, the paper has improved. Now, like I said earlier, what I did notice on this is that the Jodo paper is a little bit lighter than the brand X paper. The brand X paper is a little bit heavier. The coating seems to be a thinner coating on Jodo than what's on I'm seeing on brand X. So, but with that, let's go ahead and press this, see what it looks like. Okay, so we're going to take it over to the press. Again, I'm going to set this towards the middle of my platen. I'm going to cover it with a piece of parchment so that we don't have any ink transfer to our nice, clean, pink mat. So here we go. Let's go ahead and get a press done. Again, heavy pressure. I'm going to go ahead and hit the... Okay. We're all set. I'm going to pop this open, swing it away, put our mat over here to cool a little bit, and again, come in and peel. Now what you're going to see, the Jodo paper peels a lot easier than what I see on the Forever Trans. And again, that may have been that I had a little bit too much pressure on the Jodo Trans paper. Or I'm sorry, too much pressure on the multi-trans paper and not and a little bit less on Jodo. But you can see very good colors here. You don't really see the glue mark that we saw with the multi-trans. Overall, I really like what I see here. Okay, Dave, so now we're going to go ahead and try the brand X paper. So again, with the brand X, when I printed this, I printed glossy side up. through the iColor 600. Had set my settings to labels too. The press now has been set to 320 degrees Fahrenheit, approximate, right? And then we're going to press this for 50 seconds with the same pressure, which was a firm pressure that I used on the Jodo paper. So let's go ahead, let's get this taped in place so that it doesn't move around. Okay, so let's go over the press. Again, same thing. I'm gonna put my paper over here. I'm gonna put this on the center. I am going to put a pressing paper on top. I am going to put a nice clean pad on top of that. We're going to swing it around 320 degrees. I'm going to press firm and I'm going to set the time. Okay, so off goes the cover, the sheet. Let's see how she peels. Oh boy, I'll tell you, that was a nice clean peel, Dave. That was amazing. I'm seeing absolutely no ink residual. I think that was a good temperature, 320 for 50 seconds. I got a nice glossy finish to it. Now again, none of these products have been fixed, but again, very happy compared to this, which you can see is a little bit matte, a little bit flatter, where this one is a little bit glossy. You can see the gloss if I rock it a little bit there. And on this one, if I rock it, there's no gloss. So very nice product. Hi, so today we're going to be working with acrylic. As you can see, we have white acrylic samples that we cut out with our laser here a few weeks ago. When working with acrylic, especially when you are doing anything with heat or heat press, I strongly suggest a cast acrylic. Cast acrylic seems to do better with heat. Non-casted acrylic will end up potato chipping, I call it, on you. It'll warp in different directions. You'll still get some warping with the cast, but you can control it a little bit better with some pressure, which we'll do here in a second. The other thing is that the acrylic will come with a protective cover on both sides. I already peeled this side. You know, simply all you have to do is peel this off before you heat on both sides. And the other thing that we do as our standard practice is we go ahead and we clean these with alcohol just to make sure that there's no gummy residue left on the object itself, on the substrate, that would cause to have improper press. So let's just talk about acrylic really fast here. So some of the problems that I see with acrylic. You got to remember that acrylic's a hard surface material. This is one that we've already printed, it's a hard surface, non-porous material. So what that means is when you print, you're literally printing on top of the surface. And what will happen is that this will scratch off relatively easy. So you can see here I'm using my fingernail, and you can see I'm scratching the material off relatively easy. So what does that mean? It means that there's a couple things you can do. You can print out acrylic if you're going to then mount acrylic, let's say, in a frame where it's going to be hung and it won't be scratched. But you don't want to make them into keychains, obviously, because they'll be scratched and the printing's going to come off. Is there ways to protect it? Yeah, you can spray like an enamel fixer over it, which will protect it, but it won't protect it for a real long time, especially if it's a keychain. If you use clear cast acrylic, you can print it on the back side so it comes through the acrylic and then mount that in a frame. So there's different things you can do, but just be aware that when you do print on acrylic, especially with white transfer, it's not going to get into the substrate. It's going to be on the surface, and because of that, it's going to scratch off relatively easy. So with that said, we're going to start our testing. The testing that we're going to do first is with Forever Multi-Trans transfer paper. I've already gone ahead and set up the press. I'm going to double check my temperature right now. And it's running at about 386, 390. I've made actually an adjustment to it to get it closer to 390. With this press, it's a Chinese-made swing away. Runs a little bit hot, so actually I have the temperature set at 375 to get a 390 degree temperature. The other thing that we're going to do is with the Forever paper is we're going to use the thermometer, our rapid thermometer, and we're going to close and press this object But then what we're going to do is open the press when we reach 105 degrees Celsius. So I've got the press set to 390 degrees Fahrenheit. I'm going to put my object, my substrate in with the design face up on this. I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to cover it with a piece of parchment, hopefully, and it'll stay. And then we're going to go ahead and put, again, a piece of transfer pad over it. Now, with that said, you can actually press this without the pad if you want. I just find having the pad there gives me a better press. It just gives me a more uniform press. This has to be pressed at heavy pressure. And again, using the thermometer, we're going to open this up when it reaches 105 degrees Celsius. So let's go ahead and press away. So I opened it. It's very, very quick. If we saw, we just touched it, really just touched it. And before it hit temperature, now the question is, will it peel? So let's go in and take a look at what we have. Nice peel. Comes right off. As you can see, we didn't get a good mark on the bottom. That potentially may have been bad pressing. Here, I'll hold this out. The other thing is design may have been a little bit bigger. So again, 105 degrees Celsius is what we opened it to. When it hit 105, we opened it. We didn't get a real good uniform press on this. It could have been a little bit to do with pressure. And it could have been, again, a little bit to do with temperature too. We do see the scratching where it does remove off of it. So that's the Forever, and we'll be doing the Jodo Pack next. Hi, okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to press on the acrylic with the Jodo paper. What is required with this press is going to be getting it set to 300 degrees Fahrenheit. I've just checked the temperature, and we're actually at about 304, so we're good. 60 seconds on the time, and I got to peel this cool. So I'll take it off, and I'm going to actually set it on the ground. I'm going to probably put a 2-liter soda bottle on top of it to help press it flat, because this at that temperature will try to warp on us. So let's go ahead and we'll put this in the center. We'll go ahead, we're going to put cover over it, and we are also going to put our plastic in place. So let's see what we come up with now. Heavy pressure, and a countdown. So we're going to take off the paper, and we're going to quickly walk this over. It's a little warm, so we got to watch it. We're going to place it on the floor, because the floor is actually cool. I'm going to put a piece of wood on top of it, and I'm going to take a 2-liter bottle of Verner's, and I'm going to actually press on it for roughly about a minute. And what I'm trying to keep it from doing is actually warping. Okay. Pick it up, and let's give it a peel and see what we end up with. So, we actually ended up with a very nice transfer. Everything looks very good. Again, on top of the surface, by pressing down on it, it hasn't warped. That's 300 degrees. So that's the Jodo. Again, whoop, that's the Forever press that we had, where we felt we pressed a little lighter on the edges. The same position, the same pressure, everything else, just longer time. My wife and I were talking about it. We think probably with the Forever paper, maybe have to keep it in the press a little longer. The Jodo at 300 degrees, 60 seconds, looks good. So now what we're going to do is move over to our brand X. I've already cut the figure out. I'm going to go ahead and get it centered up best that I can. And I'm going to get it taped on. Again, this is not as transparent, so that when you're working with this to try to get it centered on your design or on your substrate, you may run into a problem. I mean, it's pretty tough to see through through the material. You can kind of feel around the edges and see, but it makes it a little bit harder. So I'm going to put a piece of tape here. Now with the press, what I've done, same thing, heavy pressure, but from a temperature point of view, we're going to set this at 275. So I have it set right now for 275 degrees. We're going to press for 60 seconds. Why 275? Based on what I learned yesterday with the wood, and then we press the wood, I think temperature on the Brand X paper can be a little bit lower, which I like, especially with acrylic, because it keeps it from warping. So we're going to soon find out if that's the case or not. Again, center of the press with a substrate, a little bit of parchment on top of that, help distribute the pressure a little bit evenly. We're going to press, and we're going to go for 60 seconds. Okay, move our cover, our paper, take our design, which is hot, move over, set it down on the floor, piece of wood on top of it, put some pressure from a Verner's bottle. So take it, flip it over, let it cool a little bit more. So let's see what we got. I think we're cooled. Yep, we are definitely cool. So let's take it over the table and let's flip it over. That'll help. And let's peel it. And like I said, peel just like yesterday. It just peels on its own. Really, really super easy peel. It looks really nice. No, my wife doesn't have COVID. She just has a bad cough. Looks really good. Real nice transfer. Really, really nice transfer. Again, a little bit of gloss that we were seeing yesterday. So, a review, Brand X. Whoops. We were able to press at a lower temperature. Very nice distribution of ink. And the lower the temperature on acrylic, the better, because it won't warp. Then we have the Joyo paper that pressed really nicely. Again, nice distribution of ink and had no issues. And then we had the Forever, which we had an issue with the press. It could be something that we did wrong. We were talking about it. We didn't use the 5mm or the 2.5mm press pad. We did only use the 0.5mm press pad, but I don't believe that's enough to cause this problem. I think honestly, it's something where we'd have to put some more time to it so that we get a better heat transfer. So that's it on acrylic. Hello, Dave. And so today what we're going to be working on is aluminum. And the type of aluminum that I like using, I actually buy from Home Depot, and it's nothing more than aluminum flashing. In this case, it's 10 inches wide by 10 feet long. It comes in a roll such as this. And the reason I like using this material, it's very thin, which I'll show you the benefit of that in a second. Also, it allows me to sublimate on. It has a polyurethane coating on it to protect it, I think, on the roof of the homes. And that coating is actually a polyurethane coating, which does allow you to sublimate. It's a little tricky, but you can do it. The finish that you get on it is very, very nice. I mean, it's very colorful, very vivid. The ink doesn't scratch off. It really does a nice job taking to this type of material. And you can use it for all kinds of different types of applications. So if you're going to do multi-decoration, for example, where you're going to be using maybe the white toner and print an object on it, and then in our case use a laser to maybe cut out an outline that then lays over the top of the metal, it gives it a very unique finish. So it can give you a much more artistic thing. Now, of course, it has sharp edges, things like this that you'd have to protect for if you're going to use it on its own, but it is a good material. The reason I like the flashing, it's thin. It's thin enough that you can actually cut it with scissors very, very easily, and don't have to have any kind of special tools to use. So it's a great material to have on hand. So what we're going to do is we're going to run through the Forever Multi-Trans first. We're going to see how I press that. The first thing I do, especially with this flashing materials, we always use a little bit of alcohol. We'll spray it on there. We'll clean off the surface again, just to make sure there's no oils or impurities that could disrupt our finish. And we'll transfer it over to the press. Now the press is all set. Again, this is set at 390 degrees. I know we've had some discussion regarding temperature. The instructions, if you look at Forever on page 2, when it talks about hard surfaces, it does say to set the 390. What you want to do is close the press and then open the press. For this example in aluminum, we're going to open when we see an operating temperature of 120 C on our thermometer. And then we're going to peel this cool. And they also call for fixing, but fixing is not necessary with this material. I haven't found any issue why it needed to be fixed. So with that, we're going to place the material onto our press. I'm going to also put in here our thermometer. And again, I've mounted the thermometer on the exact same substrate that I'm using. That way we have a good representation of temperature. Get everything to work for me here this morning. We will place a piece of parchment over the top to protect our pad. And now we're going to use the thicker 2.5 millimeter pad. So with that, we'll go ahead and close this. And we'll just go ahead and let it go in 120. So at that point, we'll release it, open it up, swing it away. We're going to remove our mat, remove our paper, lay our temperature down here just to get it so it's cooling, and take our substrate, which is very warm. Floor is a nice area to let things cool down. Okay, it's cooled back down. Like I said, it happens relatively quick. And now we'll peel. The paper's going to be somewhat stuck to the substrate. You got to kind of get in here with the fingernail, and you got to get it lifted. Once you get it lifted, the key here, again, is peeling much like you would a two-step t-shirt. You want to keep it rolling it, nice and thin down, and even pressure as you come across, and it comes right off. And there you go. You get the finished substrate. Really nice, vivid colors. It's a good process, and it's a good substrate to use. We're going to do the Jodo paper, and I've gone ahead and changed the press right now to 330 degrees. And the way Jodo instructions calls out for the aluminum is 330 degrees, 90-second press time. Peel it very cool and wants heavy pressure. Piece of our substrate, the aluminum, quick clean with a little bit of alcohol. Get all the oils off. Again, we'll take it over to the press, put towards the middle of the press. Again, piece of parchment paper to cover it. And this time we're going to go with a thinner mat. And because I'm going with a thinner mat, I'm going to go ahead and increase my pressure by a full turn so I have heavy pressure on this as called out. I'm going to push down on it, press my button, and let it count down for 90 seconds. Okay, we're coming up on our time. I'm going to release it. And nice thing about this material is it cools very, very quickly. Okay. Get started, and I'm going to pull it out, keep it low, even pressure. Oops, didn't have the best peel there, ripped, but that's all right. Still going to come out perfectly fine. So there you go. That's the Jodo two-step. Again, the only thing that I see here a little bit is, and I think that's from the floor, a little bit of dirt, is the paper was thin, it tore, but overall, pretty good product, looks good. Move over and use the brand X. I'm really not going to make much changes to the setting on the heat press. Use the same settings that I have with the Jodo paper. Again, to begin the operation, we take our aluminum substrate, a little bit of alcohol, go ahead and get that rubbed down, put our design on. Again, over to the press. I'm going to place it down in the center of the press. Piece of parchment paper. Again, our thin 0.5 millimeter mat, just to help on the distribution. And I'm going to press it, heavy pressure, and let her go for 90 seconds. Okay, stop that. Okay, here we go. We're gonna move this over. It's hot. You do not want to catch it from the bottom. You want to catch it from the edges because it is very hot. Okay. It's cooled off. Find my tape, so I like to peel from the opposite side. Again, peel up your edge, get your edge started. A little bit of fingernail to get that going. And then just peel low. And again, very, very easy peel on this paper. Very easy peel. Good colors, nice and vivid again. So what we're seeing here is the brand X. Really good, actually. You still see the a more glossy finish to it than what we're seeing with the Jodo paper, which will be right here next to it. So that's compared to Jodo. And then next to that would be the Forever. So I'm seeing a brighter sheen, more gloss with the brand X. I think we're going to mix things up a little bit more today, or a little bit different today. We're going to first press the brand X, and the only reason for that, it's easier for my press to heat up than it is to cool down. So what I've done is I've printed out 2 sheets, one with the Forever multi-trans, and then of course one with the brand X. My plan is I'm going to cut these. We're going to apply 3 different ones. We're going to do the hot transfer as we did yesterday. And try to compare it to the results that you had. I'm going to clean our substrate real quick. So again, the press settings really haven't changed since yesterday. We're going to go with a heavier press. Place the substrate in the middle. We're going to cover it with a piece of parchment and then a very thin mat, heat mat. Rotate it around, and again, fairly heavy pressure. Start our countdown. It's going to be in there for 60 seconds. While it's counting down, I'm going to grab. Okay, so pop this open, and we're going to remove our thin mat, our piece of material, or our parchment, I'm sorry. We're going to carry this over. And again, I'm just going to rub this gently with our cloth. Just kind of help make sure that the design's pressed in. I'm going to get a little bit of a corner started. And I'm going to peel. And as you can see, it peeled very nicely. I have no residual that I can see. Those are just scratches from my previous rubbing. Let me put a little bit of alcohol on this. We'll see what it does. Usually I apply alcohol towards the end. Apply it to the middle. There is a little bit of residual. Not a lot though, and it's coming right up with the alcohol. So there we go. That's the brand X. Carry it over. Again to the center, parchment paper, and our covering. And I'm going to press that again for 60 seconds. Okay, we're going to pop that open, remove our cover, remove our parchment. I'm going to once again slide this over. Carry it over. I'm going to give it a very light rubbing. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to find a corner. Oh, came right up. Hope I didn't scratch in the process. I may have scratched it such. Came up a lot faster than I thought it would. We have a little bit of residual, as you can see here. You can see it right there. Let's apply a little bit of alcohol to that and see what happens. Coming right up. But there it goes, and that residual came right off with just a little bit of alcohol. Okay, take my substrate, apply it to the middle, a little bit of heat tape, over to our press, apply it to the middle, parchment cover, and a thin mat. And I'm going to press against 290 for 60 seconds. Okay, pop it open. remove our protective mat, our parchment. Again, I'm going to slide it over to the work table. I'm going to apply a small amount of pressure and kind of rub out the design again, just to make sure that we got good fixing on it. Plus help cool it a little bit, I think, before I peel it. Try to catch an edge carefully, peel it up. And there's our design. And again, if you look on this, you'll see around the edge, let me see if I can get it in the camera, you can see the residual. I'm going to, again, try to take that and get rid of it. Let's get a little bit of alcohol. And again, I'm doing this warm, so this is not cool. This is definitely warm. And we're gonna just rub that residual out, comes right out. Everything looks good. I'm gonna just buff it out. And the residual's gone. So, there is brand X with the 3 designs. I feel I've got really, really good color. Peeled really, really nicely. Again, it was done hot, 290 for 60 seconds. And clean my residual up right afterward. So Dave, now we're gonna go ahead and switch over to the Forever paper. To save time, I've already gone ahead and cut the paper, cleaned my substrate. I'm gonna go ahead and take it to the press. Now again, we'll be using the rapid rise thermometer on this. I am taking your suggestion that we discussed yesterday. What I've done is the actual thermometer lead is behind a piece of Forever paper. I'm going to put that in onto our design so that it does simulate, you know, the true temperature of what we're seeing. I'm slipping in our paper. And again, this is the 2.5 millimeter green, the heavier, thicker mat is what Forever calls for a 5 millimeter. I still think that's way too much, at least here in the States. So we're set here, heavy pressure. Let's see where I'm at. I got to back this off just a touch, and there we go. So let's go ahead and let this cook. There's 144. So let's pop it open. We'll remove our green mat. And remove our parchment paper. I'm going to try my best to get our paper peeled up with the temperature probe. I'm going to move this over to the work table. And as I did yesterday, I'm going to catch a corner. Very warm. Okay, and here comes a peel. And you can definitely see that that film that we talked about yesterday is on this, including the center. So now the trick's going to be, will that be able to be removed like we were able to remove yesterday? Not as clean as a peel as we got with the brand X. So, yep. So again, that adhesion layer we talk about comes right up. You can see it's taking a little bit more scrubbing to get off than the brand X was. You see this peeling right up and off. Polish. Okay. And here is brand X on the top and the Forever Trans on the bottom. About the same color consistency. And again, the only thing I can say is it took a little bit more work to get the multi-trans paper to clean up versus the cleanup that I got done with the brand X. Okay, Dave. Here's what we got in the finished product. The top, up across the top here, is the brand X. The bottom is the Forever Multi-Trans. I'm outside right now. I'm trying to get this so you can see the colors. It's kind of tough. We had a blue sky a second ago. Now the clouds are moving in. But that should give you some idea, I think, on the color. Sorry about the tree. I'm trying to get the reflections out of these things. Here's the cars. The only thing I noticed just a little bit different is maybe a little darker blue in the multi-trans, but again, peeled very easily. I had to rub off, like you saw before, that top coating. And then here's the Have a Nice Holiday. Everything came out really, really nice on both of them. So I don't know if this is supposed to be black or a light green. It almost looks like a light green up close. So that, I hope, will help with your findings, and I'll talk to you later on.